Moonshine has always held a particular place in the hearts of Americans, one that's always been wrapped up in a certain outlaw patina. But lately, moonshine has been moving from the back alley to the boardroom. Here to tell us more is WSJ's Charles Passy with the Weekend Sip. Hi, Charles. Hey. Great to see you.
Pleasure, as always.
So has this sort of appeal of moonshine been tied up with the mythology, or is there more to it than that?
Well, I mean, moonshine is basically unaged whiskey, but it's unaged whiskey with its own kind of rich culture,
right.
and as you say, a back alley culture. The thing is, really starting about a decade ago, we had legitimate, legal moonshine that kind of borrowed the idea of moonshine, kind of the branding, if you will, but was actually legitimately produced by regular spirits brands.
So what is it that makes moonshine moonshine?
Moonshine is basically, just think of it as whiskey that has not been aged. In some cases, it's not necessarily quote unquote a whiskey. It's made maybe more in the style almost of a vodka, but think of it as something that doesn't have aging, that is essentially a clear, flavorless. It doesn't necessarily have to be high proof, although people tend to think of it as high proof.
It certainly has had a colorful history, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Give us a little quick rundown.
Well, I mean, moonshine has been made. I mean, Appalachia is associated with it. What people don't really understand is that moonshine as such is also an urban phenomenon. I mean, it's been made, theoretically, when they make it in prisons, it's made in prisons.
Right.
Moonshine is made, it's basically any homemade, homegrown whiskey, if you will, but I think it's most associated with the deep south or the rural parts of this country, where it was made in these kind of makeshift stills
and
in
through
the woods.
Prohibition and the whole thing.
Absolutely.
So now it's getting fancy and high concept. Tell us about what
this is extremely high concept. We started to have about 5-6 years ago these kind of boutique moonshines, often packaged in Mason-style jars or different sort of almost hipster back alley kind of thing. This takes it to a whole other level. This is a company called Stillhouse. They were originally packaging theirs in glass bottles, and then they just said, what the heck? Let's put it in a turpentine can.
Brilliant marketing move, because here we are talking about the packaging.
Right, exactly. Now, I should be clear, this is not an actual recycled turpentine can, but it is to evoke that oil can, turpentine can, kind of that almost rustic country, but look at the lettering, look at this is very clever. The packaging is brilliant. The packaging is also incredibly practical. Think about how many times you've broken a glass bottle in your lifetime. So this makes a lot of sense. They also say the whiskey chills a little bit better and holds its cold temperature
Which is fun to do when you've got flavored whiskey,
right.
Now over there.
Of course, we've got the whole patina of flavors. This is the original, but some examples of their flavors are peach tea, mint chip, there's coconut, there's a whole gamut of flavors.
So much fun. Well, let's give it a try.
All right, this is the original.
And I love that we're drinking it out of mason jars.
There we go.
This is perfect. Hey, you know what? It's not quite what I was expecting. It's not bad.
It's not necessarily that. People, I think,
not that I was expecting it to be bad. Let's say,
people expect it to be rough. And
right.
It's not. I mean, just think of this as this is basically it's a corn-based version. You don't have to use corn, but it's most associated with corn. It's a corn-based version. Think of this as a very young bourbon. I mean, it's a bourbon with really no aging. But, so I feel like you get this nice sort of sweet note of corn in it.
It tastes good to me.
Very drinkable.
Your expert opinion, Charles.
I mean, whiskey snobs will tell you moonshine is not anything to be had.
Are you a whiskey snob?
Well, I'm a bit of a whiskey snob in that, the real taste and flavor of whiskey comes from aging. This is pleasant. I mean, this is but it's pleasant in the sense that it reminds me of a young bourbon, but I think I'd still, in the end, maybe prefer a bourbon with a little age on it. On the other hand, I am not a fan of the flavors, but they do hugely well.
The flavors do, so when you freeze them, you can have a little, dessert?
Well, first of all, you don't have to freeze them, but I gotta say, when you freeze the mint chip, it is kind of almost ice cream-like. Not my thing, but maybe somebody's.
Hey, it could be somebody's this weekend. Charles,
all right,
Passy,
cheers again.
Thank you so much. Cheers.